Okay, folks, welcome back. Professor Richard Holozak talking to you here. Continuing in our series of videos on the Computer Information Systems major at Baruch College. This series of videos now is going to talk a little bit more specifically about different collections of electives that you can take and within the CIS major, what we call major tracks. So this first one up is going to be about a web developer, becoming a web developer and how you can prepare yourself. As before, a little bit about me, my CISnet website, and my personal website. As always, comments, suggestions, questions are welcome. We will definitely incorporate them into later videos. So, prior videos, which we put the links in down in the description, we're looking at the CIS major in terms of the 4 required courses. We briefly looked over the list of electives. You have basically 4 courses to take out of the possible, I think there's 19 or possibly 20 electives that you can take here. And so the question is, how do I choose, if I'm a student here at Baruch and CIS, what collection of courses could I take here out of the electives that sort of makes sense? And so the idea for this video is if you're interested in doing some type of web development, being a web developer or web architect, a web coder, there's a lot of sort of job titles that go around that, but that basically have to do with working on websites. So here's our suggestion. There's nothing written in stone here. This is not something that once you start on this path you have to stick with it. Just our really just suggestions on how you might focus things. So of course with the CIS major you have to take the CIS 3100 Object-Oriented Programming 1, CIS 3400 Database Management Systems, and 4800 Systems Analysis and Design. You come back at the end of your time with us and you're taking CIS 5800, the IT Development and Project Management. Within that, here are a collection of courses, and again, your electives, you're going to have 4 CIS electives. And if you want to be a web developer, here are some things that you might want to think about. There's an e-business technologies, which talks about how we use these different web technologies and e-commerce technologies to apply to business. We have principles of web design, which talks about the front-end design, and I'm going to define what front-end, back-end, and all these things mean in the next couple of slides. The web application development is more on the middle tier or the back end. Database Management Systems 2 takes you into even more depth than the first database course, especially as it relates to things like data warehousing, which can be an important part. And we also have a Network Information System Security, or soon to be called IS Security course. So each of these are important. Let's see how they map onto the job of web development. So I'm assuming, and I think this is a pretty safe assumption, that you've used a web browser at some point in your life. Probably would have been impossible for you to find this video if you had never used a web browser. So we think about what is the job of the web browser, and really the job of the web browser is it's the user interface. It's what users interact with, and that's whether or not I'm on my PC here and I'm interacting with Internet Explorer or Firefox or Google Chrome, or maybe I'm sitting down with my iPad or my iPhone, going through the Safari web browser on those devices, or even sitting on an Android phone and using a web browser there. At its core, all web browsers need to understand this language called HTML, the Hypertext Markup Language. And that's really just a text-based language that gives instructions to the web browser as to how to show the text and images and video, Java applets and things. Where are they going to go on the page? What are they going to look like? What are the fonts and colors? Some of those are summarized in what are called cascading style sheets. That's the CSS that you see here. And so one of the jobs of the web developer is, how do I build all of these pieces together? How do I code the HTML? How do I drop in images and video? Maybe how do I do some type of automation or some type of interactivity using JavaScript or maybe Adobe Flash. And some of the tools that we look at here might be things like Dreamweaver or Microsoft Expression Studio. There's a bunch of tools out there. These are just two that we happen to know about. Now, ultimately, in your web browser, you're going to want to go to another link. You're going to want to go and find another resource. And what that's going to require you to do is click on a link that will result in an HTTP request. HTTP is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And that's just a really simple way of making your web browser making a connection to a web server and saying, hey, please go and get me that HTML page, or get me that image, or get me that video that you have. So for static web pages that are just HTML and some cascading style sheets and some images, that's all fine and good. What the web server will then do is just simply echo that content back, and your web browser shows the HTML. And so for a long time, this was pretty much the only interaction that we had. Web browsers just asked for some page from the web server, what we call a static HTML page, for example, and the web server would give it back and it would display in the web browser. But now we're going to add a layer of interactivity where the HTTP request isn't just getting a page, it's making a request for some resource. It could be packaging up some type of parameters for a query. Maybe the user is doing a search for a movie or a product on an e-commerce website. And here's where coding techniques like PHP, active server pages, Java server pages, there's a whole bunch of programming languages and tools that are available here that can accept that request and maybe even turn it into a query to a database. Okay, so if we follow all of this through, you might fill in the name of your favorite movie. Maybe you want to rent it. That gets packaged up as an HTTP request. Maybe a PHP or an active server page script opens that up on the web server, turns your request into a database query. Now in the second video we talked about the structured query language, right? So relational databases like Oracle and SQL Server and MySQL, they all like this SQL language. So your web server is going to query the database server. It's going to query its tables to try and find that movie that you're interested in, maybe what the link is to rent it and the price and so on. And it's going to return that as a data response to the web server. Now your PHP or your active server page is going to have to go back into action and format that result as HTML. After all, your web browser only understands HTML. It doesn't know how to talk directly to the database. So again, HTTP request, some scripting language here is going to unpack that request and turn it into a database query. The database query is going to run on that relational database. That result is going to get returned back to the web server and then formatted as HTML to go back to your web browser. And believe it or not, this dance, this sort of three-party dance, goes on trillions of times a day. Every time you log into Facebook, every time you search for a book on Amazon.com, this little dance happens. All right, so that's kind of the basics in however many minutes I jabbered on about that. How do our courses line up with that? Well, the first course that we want to look at is again on that front-end design. What we call the front end is where the web browser lives. Whoops, I went one page too far. There we go. So on the web browser here, we're going to have our HTML, our cascading style sheets, images, video, all that good stuff. And the CIS 3630 course, which is called Principles of Web Design, is going to help us learn how to code in all of these different languages. We might get into some things about embedding applets, but Java applet development is not really part of the CIS 3630. So what I'd like to say is, for the most part, CIS 3630 is all about the front end, what the user interacts with on that web browser. Now, on the back end, what we call the back end is the database server here. We have our relational database, and sure enough, our Database 1 and Database 2 course are going to talk all about database servers and the SQL language, everything that you need to know to be able to work with relational databases. The Database 2 course also gets into what we call NoSQL databases, which are really not only SQL databases. So things like Vertica and DynamoDB, JSON stores, a lot of other sort of very cutting-edge technologies that are used there, and those are going to get tied in with the Database 2 course. That leaves the middle tier, and usually the web server hangs out here. So when we talk about things like PHP and active server pages, we talk a little bit about that in the CIS 3400 course, but they're definitely not PHP or active server page programming courses. We do at least discuss how you connect a web server to a database server. The real hero here on the middle tier is our CIS 4160 course called Web Application Development. These are kind of the green tags that we see here. And this is going to talk all about Java servlets, how you program the middle tier with Java systems, so you can connect your web server to the database server and then back for the web browser to make requests there. There's also some discussion of Java applets, but the main focus of CIS 4160 is all about this middle tier and for Java programming. So you'll learn things like Java server pages, Java servlet coding, how to configure Apache and Tomcat servers, how to create schemas maybe with MySQL or Oracle on the database server, and then obviously connecting that HTML, cascading style sheets, images, and all of that for display on a web browser. So right here is a collection of 4 courses that you could take that would really flesh out your CIS major. Principles of web design on the front end, web application development on the middle tier, and a couple of database courses. If you're not interested in getting in that much detail with the second database course, I think that's fine. You could still get quite a bit out of the e-commerce course or some of the other electives that we have. Maybe the security course if you're interested in how do we secure all of these communications between these 3 levels, if you will. Okay, so that's all I want to say, I think, for now on Web Application System. Happy to give you more details. And again, feel free to give us some comments and suggestions, and we'll look forward to chatting with you on our next video.